The rain fell in jagged sheets over the rusting bars of Cell Block C, turning the concrete floor into a slick mirror of shadow and dim light. Prisoner Jackson Hale's voice cracked through the empty corridor. "Rex, I need you." The warden's footsteps echoed, heavy and impatient. But the dog, a hulking K9 with eyes like coal, hesitated at the bars, refusing to obey the guard's commands. Something in the cell's darkness whispered secrets that no one was meant to hear. Hale's hand trembled over the cold steel, and in that moment, the dog's refusal became more than loyalty. It became a warning that would shatter every assumption about the investigation. Rain hammered the roof of the prison yard like a relentless drum, mingling with the low moan of the wind through the chain-link fences. Jackson Hale sat on the cold concrete bench, arms folded across his chest, eyes fixed on the far corner where the shadows pooled like ink. The K9 Rex, a German shepherd with fur slick from the rain, paced along the fence, ears pricked, growling softly. Guards barked at the dog to stand down, but Rex ignored them, his gaze locked on Jackson as though reading some silent message. Jackson's lips moved in a whisper, almost drowned by the storm. "Rex, it's time." His voice carried a mixture of fear, urgency, and something darker, something buried for years. He could feel it pressing against his ribs, the secret he had carried since the night the warehouse burned. Every guard in the yard had learned to respect him for his unpredictable nature, but even they didn't understand the bond between man and dog. And maybe that was the only reason he had survived this long. Warden Caldwell's heavy boots splashed through the puddles as he approached. His face, pale under the flickering security lights, twisted into a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "Hale, enough games. The dog's not your friend. It's a weapon. Stand away from the fence." Jackson didn't flinch. Rex growled again, low and deliberate, hackles raised. "He's not just a dog," Jackson said quietly, the words almost lost in the rain. "He knows." The warden's brow furrowed. "Knows what?" But Jackson didn't answer. Instead, he leaned closer to the cold steel bars, his hand brushing against the rusted metal, trembling slightly. "The warehouse," he whispered. "They never found the body." The rain intensified, beating against the concrete and echoing like distant gunfire. Rex whined, a soft, human-like sound, and then lunged forward, barking with ferocity that made even the guards hesitate. Jackson's eyes shone with something between triumph and terror. "Go!" he said, and the dog froze, nose twitching. Something was out there, something the guards couldn't see, but Rex could. The tension pulled at everyone's nerves. Officer Martin, a young guard with more enthusiasm and experience, shifted uneasily. "Sir, maybe we should." "Stand still," Caldwell snapped. "Do you want him tearing your arm off?" Jackson smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement crossing his pale face. "He won't touch anyone who doesn't deserve it." A moment passed in which the storm seemed to hold its breath. Then Rex bolted, surging against the leash, dragging the young officer with it. Martin yelped, arms flailing. But the dog stopped suddenly, nose pressed to a dark corner beneath the scaffolding where the shadows were deepest. His growl was a low, warning rumble that shook the air. Jackson stood abruptly, his chair clattering to the wet floor. "He's found it." The word hung in the air, heavy and charged, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. Caldwell stepped forward, hand on his holster, but Jackson held up a trembling hand. "Not yet," he said, voice almost pleading. "Let him show you." Through the dim light, the edges of a wooden crate were barely visible. The rain pooled around it, soaking the corners, turning them slick. Rex pawed at it, whimpering, and then, with a strength that belied his size, shoved it aside. The crate splintered, revealing a bundle of charred fabric and something more sinister. A hand. The guards froze. Even Caldwell's face paled. Jackson swallowed hard, the memory flooding back. The night the warehouse burned had been meant to erase everything, to bury mistakes, betrayals, and bodies alike. But Rex had never forgotten, and apparently neither had fate. Jackson stepped closer, eyes scanning the crate. "I told you they never found him." He glanced at Caldwell, voice low and dangerous. "And now, someone's going to pay for it." A sudden movement caught their attention. Shadows shifted along the fence line. Another figure, lurking in the storm. Rex growled, rigid as a statue, hackles bristling. Jackson froze. "You shouldn't have come," he said, voice trembling but firm. The figure stepped into the light. Officer Kane, a man who had once been a trusted ally in the department, now standing with an unreadable expression. "Jackson, we need to talk," Kane said, hands raised. Rex barked, a sharp, cutting sound, and lunged between them. Kane froze, a flicker of fear crossing his face. Jackson whispered, almost to himself, "You lied. You were there. You let it happen." The storm raged around them, wind tearing through the yard as though nature itself wanted to wash away the sins that festered in the dark. Hale's chest heaved, memories of betrayal, trust broken, and loyalty tested crashing over him. Rex's growls blended with the rain, a chorus of warning, of truth finally clawing its way to the surface. "Why did you call him?" Kane asked, voice tight, almost fragile. "Why the dog?" Jackson's gaze locked on Rex, eyes dark, unreadable. "Because he doesn't lie," he said, simply, "not like you." For a long moment, the rain was the only sound. Then, from the shadows of the yard, another figure emerged, someone none of them had expected, and with their appearance, the first real tremor of fear pulsed through the group. Someone who knew everything, someone who could destroy them all. Jackson's jaw tightened. He looked at Rex, who stood at attention, every muscle coiled like a spring. The dog's instincts, sharper than any human's, sensed a danger before it stepped fully into the light. Hale's voice dropped to a whisper, one carried by rain and steel. "Get ready, because nothing we thought we knew is true anymore." And with that, the first thread of the investigation began to unravel. Chapter 1 sets the stage. Small town prison, mysterious prisoner, a dog with almost supernatural intuition and a looming betrayal. The tension between Jackson, the guards, and Kane hints at the twisted secrets to come. If you're ready, I'll write Chapter 2 next, continuing the suspense and deepening the psychological and emotional layers. The rain slowed to a drizzle, leaving the prison yard slick with puddles that reflected the weak, yellow glow of the floodlights. Jackson Hale's boots splashed against the wet concrete as he followed Rex toward the dark corner where the crate had been. The body inside was gone, vanished as if the storm itself had swallowed it, leaving only charred fragments of fabric and a lingering, acrid stench. Rex's nose twitched, his ears pinned back in alertness, scanning the shadows that crept along the perimeter of a yard. Jackson's mind raced. The warehouse fire had been meant to erase everything. The body had been buried deep, meant to vanish into memory and rumor. Yet here it was, or at least the evidence of it. That meant someone had been digging, watching, waiting, and if someone knew, they had motives dangerous enough to make Jackson's skin crawl. Officer Kane lingered near the chain-link fence, voice tight, hands trembling slightly. "Jackson, I didn't," he stopped. Words failed him. He'd been caught between duty and fear, guilt and survival. Now, standing inches from the truth, he looked every bit the man Jackson had once trusted and now despised. A shadow of betrayal, lingering like a bad smell. Jackson said nothing. He only watched Kane, every flicker of movement under flickering light noted, cataloged, stored. Rex growled, low and deliberate, forcing Kane to step back. "The dog doesn't lie," Jackson said softly. "He never forgets. And neither do I." From the corner of the yard, Warden Caldwell's boots echoed as he circled the scene. His face was impassive, but his eyes betrayed a calculating curiosity. He'd spent 20 years maintaining control over Hale, yet in moments like these, he realized the illusion of control was fragile. Jackson had the one thing that could disrupt the fragile balance: loyalty from a creature sharper, faster, and more instinctive than any human. "Explain," Caldwell said, voice low but firm. "Everything." Jackson took a deep breath, his chest tight, lungs working against a storm of memories. "It started years ago," he said. "The warehouse, it wasn't just a fire. It was a cover-up. Kane here." His gaze snapped at the officer, cold and piercing. He knew more than he let on, more than anyone thought. And now it's unraveling. Kane flinched. I didn't." "You lied," Jackson interrupted. "We all lied. Everyone lied. And someone paid the price." The rain had stopped entirely now, leaving an eerie quiet that pressed on them like a physical weight. Rex's hackles were still raised, his body rigid, nose sniffing at the wet concrete. Then, a faint scraping noise came from the shadowed wall at the far end of the yard, a sound so soft it could be mistaken for the wind. "Did you hear that?" Jackson whispered, hand brushing against the wet steel fence. Caldwell nodded subtly, tension tightening his jaw. "Stay alert." Rex stiffened and bolted, sprinting toward the source of sound with precision only AK-9 trained in years of law enforcement could exhibit. Jackson ran after him, boots slapping against concrete, heart pounding as adrenaline coiled his stomach. Kane hesitated, then followed, eyes wide as he saw the dog's intensity. The shadow resolved into a figure crouched near the fence. A woman, hair plastered her face by rain, hands gripping a small, soaked folder. She looked up at the three men approaching, eyes wide with panic and recognition. Jackson froze. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was someone who had vanished from the investigation years ago, presumed lost, someone with secrets tied to the warehouse fire and the body that never should have been found. Rex growled but did not attack. Instead, he stood between Jackson and the woman, as though judging her intentions. Jackson's pulse quickened. The woman's lips trembled. "Jackson, you have to listen. They're still watching. You don't understand." "What do you mean?" Jackson's voice was low, but sharp, cutting through the tension. She shook her head, her hands trembling so violently that the folder slipped from her grasp. Paper scattered across the wet concrete, soaking instantly. Caldwell bent to pick one up, scanning the smudged writing. The words made his blood run cold, names, dates, and locations he thought were erased from memory. A web of lies stretching across years, implicating everyone who had been involved in the warehouse cover-up. "You see now," the woman whispered, voice cracking. "It's not just a fire, it's everything they hid. Everyone who thought they were safe, they're not." Jackson knelt to pick up the papers, eyes scanning the soaked, blurred ink. Each name, each date, each place carved a path through betrayal, corruption, and murder. Kane's hands trembled as he realized his involvement could no longer be concealed. Caldwell's face hardened, jaw tight, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Control slipping through his fingers, the perfect mass cracking. Rex's ears twitched. He bolted again toward the corner of the yard where the shadows seemed to thicken unnaturally. Jackson and Kane followed, heartbeats synchronizing with the dog's movements, anticipation coiling like a living thing in the dark. Then, suddenly, Rex stopped, nose pressed to a seam in the concrete floor, an old maintenance hatch, rusted and hidden beneath years of grime. He barked sharply, scratching at the edge, teeth gnashing over rusted metal. Jackson looked down at the hatch, realization dawning. They hid something here below the prison itself. Caldwell stepped forward, hand on his holster. "We don't know what." "Don't," Jackson snapped. "You're too late for words." His voice was cold, measured, and filled with years of suppressed rage. He knelt and examined the hatch, fingers tracing the rusted metal, sensing the weight of history beneath. The woman stepped closer, voice trembling. "If you open that, you'll find the rest. Everything they tried to bury, it's all there." Jackson glanced at Rex, whose ears were still pinned, eyes fixed, every muscle coiled and ready. "Are you ready?" he whispered. The dog's growl was the only answer, a warning, a promise, and a challenge. The first click of the hatch opening echoed like a gunshot in the quiet yard. Water seeped through the edges, a damp, earthy smell rising up from the darkness below. Jackson's pulse thundered, anticipation and fear twisting in his gut. Kane looked pale, Caldwell's knuckles whitened around his holster. The woman held back, eyes wide, lips pressed together in a silent plea. And then, from the darkness, a faint, rasping sound emerged, a sound of life. Not dead, but barely. Someone trapped, someone hidden. Someone whose story had been erased, and whose secrets were now clawing their way back into the light. Jackson's breath caught. Rex's growl deepened. And as the hatch swung fully open, revealing the dark, suffocating tunnel below, one truth became undeniable. The investigation was no longer about a fire, a body, or even betrayal. It was about survival, and the reckoning that would come for everyone who had lied. The storm outside had passed, leaving only the suffocating quiet of the prison yard and the ticking, living terror that waited in the shadows below. Jackson stepped forward, hand brushing against the damp concrete, heart hammering. He knew this was the moment that would change everything. And as he descended into the tunnel, Rex at his side, the realization struck him cold. Some truths are meant to remain buried, but not all can be. The tunnel smelled of wet earth and rust, each breath a mix of decay and fear. Jackson Hale's boots splashed through shallow puddles as Rex padded silently beside him, ears pricked and muscles coiled, a sentinel born of instinct and loyalty. The woman who had appeared in the yard trailed behind, muttering fragments of warnings under her breath. Kane and Caldwell followed, the former's face pale, the latter's expression tight, his mind working through damage control even in the face of the unknown. "Be careful," Jackson whispered, though no one could hear him over the dripping water and the occasional echo of distant footsteps. Footsteps that might belong to them, or someone else lurking in the darkness. His heart thudded, a rhythm mingling adrenaline with dread. Every memory of the warehouse fire pressed against his ribs like a phantom hand. Rex stopped suddenly, tail stiff, nose twitching toward a side chamber carved from the earthen wall. The dog's growl reverberated, low and dangerous. Jackson knelt, brushing his fingers along the damp floor. "They hid someone here," he muttered, voice barely audible. "Someone alive, or barely." The woman's voice trembled. "It's worse than you think. They weren't just covering a murder. They were covering everything. Experiments, betrayals, the bodies you never found. Everyone thought it was over. It isn't." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "Who?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "Not who what?" The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. Dim shafts of light from hidden grates above barely penetrated the gloom, illuminating the twisted shapes of metal racks, empty crates, and scattered papers. The remnants of a secret no one had expected to survive. And there, shackled to the far wall, was a figure. Bent, filthy, alive but broken. Jackson froze. Recognition struck him like a physical blow. It was someone he had thought dead, the final piece of the warehouse puzzle, the one whose disappearance had haunted him for years. And the realization hit like ice. Kane had known. Everyone had known. "You let this happen," Jackson said, voice raw, directed at Kane. "You stood there while they buried him. While you lied to me." Kane's face paled, jaw tightening. I had no choice. You always have a choice," Jackson snapped, stepping closer, fists clenched. "But you didn't make it." Rex growled, moving closer to Jackson, nose brushing against his leg, warning Kane. The dog's instincts, sharper than any human's, had always been the truest measure of loyalty. Kane flinched. Caldwell's expression darkened, hand resting lightly on his holster. "Jackson, we can fix this. Just calm down." "Fix this?" Jackson laughed bitterly, eyes scanning the chamber. "You can't fix betrayal. You can't fix the years they spent hiding the truth. And you sure as hell can't fix the lives you ruined." The woman stepped forward, holding out the folder she had carried. "Everything is here," she said softly. "Evidence, confessions, names. You can expose them all, or you can walk away. But once you see it, there's no turning back." Jackson's eyes flicked to the man shackled to the wall. He was barely conscious, his eyes sunken, lips cracked from dehydration. "Are you okay?" Jackson asked quietly. A faint rasp escaped the man's lips. You have to stop them," he whispered, "before it's too late." Rex whined softly, nudging Jackson's hand with his nose. The dog's warmth and loyalty reminded him of what he was fighting for. Not revenge, not power, but justice. And perhaps, somewhere in that darkness, redemption. Jackson stepped back, taking a deep breath. "Caldwell, Kane descends tonight. You lied. You betrayed. You let people die. And now you answer for it." Caldwell's hand twitched near his holster. Kane's eyes darted between Jackson and the shackled figure, realization dawning that everything they had built on deception was about to collapse. The tension shattered with a sudden, unexpected movement. From the shadows, a figure emerged, another witness, someone whose loyalty had been hidden until now. They carried a small firearm, trembling but resolute. "Step away," they said, voice steady despite the fear. Jackson froze, calculating. The room was a powder keg of secrets, lies, and betrayal. One wrong move, and everything could explode. Rex growled, hackles raised, sensing the threat before any human could react. The dog's presence grounded Jackson, reminding him that even in this chaos, there was truth, there was loyalty, there was purpose. In a swift, fluid motion, Jackson stepped forward, placing himself between the gun and the shackled man. "We don't need violence," he said, voice calm but firm. "We have the truth. That's more powerful than any weapon." For a long moment, the tension hung in the air like fog, heavy and suffocating. Then the figure lowered the gun, stepping back, shaking. "You're right," they whispered. Jackson exhaled, the weight in his chest easing slightly. Kane and Caldwell looked defeated. Knowing the walls of their deception had crumbled, the woman handed Jackson a folder, soaked and heavy with evidence, and he nodded. It was enough. Justice would follow, in one way or another. He knelt beside the shackled man, undoing the restraints with care, patience, and trembling hands. "You're safe now," he said softly. "We'll make sure they pay in their own way." Rex nudged the man's shoulder, tail wagging lightly, a reminder that loyalty, once earned, could never be broken. Jackson looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of those who had betrayed him, those who had survived, and those who had been hidden from the world. Every secret had been uncovered, every lie exposed, and in that quiet, wet tunnel beneath the prison, a fragile sense of justice settled over him. No one spoke for a long moment, only the dripping water, the faint rustle of papers, and Rex's soft whine filled the chamber. Jackson finally rose, hand resting on the dog's head. "We do what we must," he said quietly, "and we remember those who can't." The woman nodded, tears streaking her dirt-smeared face. Kane lowered his head, silent, ashamed. Caldwell's expression hardened for a moment, but there was no denying the truth. Jackson had won, not with violence, but with patience, loyalty, and the courage to confront the shadows of the past. As they climbed back toward the surface, sunlight breaking weakly through the prison yard's clouds, Jackson paused. He looked at Rex, who stared back with unwavering devotion. No words were necessary. Some bonds transcended betrayal, lies, and darkness. And though the scars of the past would never fully fade, a quiet victory had been claimed. The prisoner had called out for his K9, and together they had unearthed the truth. The rain had stopped, but its echo remained, like a heartbeat in the concrete, a reminder that even in betrayal, loyalty could prevail. Jackson exhaled, eyes scanning the horizon. A storm had passed, but the world would always have shadows. The difference now was that he knew how to face them, and who he could trust when the next storm came. And in the quiet, final moments, with Rex at his side, Jackson Hale understood something he had never truly believed before. Sometimes, the truest power wasn't vengeance or fear or authority. It was loyalty. And that was something no one could ever bury.